Welcome to the Nutritious and Delicious podcast with me, Bethany. Our mission is to support busy parents all over the world to learn time management while taking care of your nutritional, physical, and mental health. After all, a healthy family starts with a healthy parent. So I'm so excited today. I have Naomi with me, and she is a maternal mental health specialist supporting expectant moms, new moms preparing mentally and emotionally for the adjustment into motherhood. So this is actually going to help reduce the risk of postpartum depression and anxiety for them. So welcome, Naomi. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here too.
Yeah, so we have this amazing topic here today, and I know I've been through, the whole up and down with kids and stuff myself. So this episode today is going to be all about the expectations we put on ourselves as women and the belief system around being this ideal perfect mom. So I would love for you to share your story and what you believe happens to women maybe before becoming a mom, and some things that they can do to kind of turn this perfection that they have around, so they don't fall victim to postnatal depression, what we call postpartum depression here, and anxiety, right? So I'd love for you to take this away and start us off here.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll tell you a bit about me, and through my journey, I've met a lot of women that have the same experiences. I think it's quite a universal thing. It's sort of twofold. When I was pregnant, there was a lot of what I was told was the good stuff, and what's going to happen when the baby arrives, and it was very, very typical. The responses I got were things like, "Oh, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be magical." Like magical is a word that I read quite a lot.
What?
Yeah. I was only really told about the good stuff, and so I got this really imbalanced view of what it was like to be a new mum.
Right.
Especially and you see it on the TV as well, don't you? You see it on TV programs, movies, on social media. People only share what they want to share with you. Right. But if you're not aware of that, then you can just think that that's it. That's what's going to happen. And so there was that. This sort of, what would you call it? Like a dream you're sort of sold from other people.
A facade.
And also, yeah. It's like it's a fantasy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like even from other people that've had kids. I guess you kind of block it out. You look back with rose-tinted glasses. I don't know what it is, but we tend not to get the full, a balanced view of what it's like to be a new mum. So I was getting all that as well. But then I had this real tendency, and this is something that I've learned about myself, that I would romanticize things a lot, and I would imagine how I thought things were going to be, and I imagined myself as this earth mother that knew exactly what to do, and I was really maternal, and maternity leave was going to be this lovely, joyful, bonding moment, and we were going to be so happy, and breastfeeding was going to be amazing. I was going to take to it really easily. So I had all these ideas of who I was going to be as a mum. So when it did actually happen, and in those first early days of being a mum, that I suddenly realised that these romantic ideas that I had about myself, and that had been sold to me as well, were pretty far from reality. And so my expectations were up in the sky, and the reality was pretty low down. And I think, but the mismatch between expectations and reality was was part of the reason that I struggled with my mental health.
Yeah.
Because there's this, it's like a secret that nobody tells you. There's like the struggles that you feel in those early days are like a secret that nobody talks about, and because nobody talks about it, and because you've got this wild idea of like really romantic idea of what it's going to be like, I assumed it was because something was wrong with me.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah. And that was a real catalyst for the decline in my mental health, because I'd already had a tough time in labour. I was already feeling a bit traumatized from that. Then I was promised this rush of love, and I didn't feel the rush of love. I didn't feel very connected to my child straight away. So there was all these things that I was expecting that I didn't get, and I thought it was because there was something wrong with me. And that really affected how I felt about myself.
It can really lower one's self-esteem, I've noticed.
Yeah. And I was diagnosed quite quickly with depression, and I knew something wasn't right.
Right.
And I really believe that a huge element of depression is low self-esteem.
Yeah.
I really do believe that.
I
think there's I didn't even know whether anything about my self-esteem, but I'd never been taught to how to build my self-esteem, how to maintain it, or how to love myself. I'd never been taught how to show myself love. And I was very hard on myself, and that was definitely part of the reason that I was diagnosed with depression.
Definitely. Like, touching on what you said, that was a lot of good nuggets of stuff, like, because I was nodding along because I honestly went through the same thing. I think when you've kind of been given a massive expectation, whether it's from yourself, society, or whatever it is, I went in before having my first child. I used to play with dolls like for a really long time, and they never cried. They were good babies, and they were perfect. They sat still when you put the nappy on them or a diaper, and they didn't cry when you put them in the car seat. They were happy to go anywhere. And that's what I think I envisioned, was that it was like, again, like you said yourself, they would be happy to do whatever you're doing, and you instantly bond to them. And right out the gate, I had a very colicky baby. So it was almost like, where's the off switch? Like, there's no off switch. And there's like, when do I get a break? And well, I don't, because it's a 24/7 job, right? Especially when you're feeding and things like that. So again, when you kind of go through those motions and you're struggling, your expectations are up here, and sort of your reality's here, and you're like, well, what's the problem? And then you instantly, as moms, we tend to go to, well, it's me. And I know I massively struggled with that too. And it's I think when you have, so like when you go through something, like when I think about when you go through something like an adverse time in your life, and you can get through it, something that's hard for you, and you manage to get through it, you're like, oh, I did it. And you're like cheering yourself on, I did it. But it's almost the opposite. It's like, oh, I can't do it. Like, what's wrong with me? And you kind of start backtracking a little bit and being like, well, there's something wrong with me. So therefore, like, I can't figure this out. And that was what I kept struggling with. Why can't I figure it out? Because I'm supposed to as the mom. Like, obviously, when a baby cries, what's the first thing most people do is they hand it back to the mom. And I'm kind of like, does anybody else want it? Like, that's how I felt. Because it's like, I didn't know like what to do. I was just like everybody else, where, I wasn't sure myself, and it was a very steep learning curve for me. So the fact was, when everyone passed it to me, it was almost like they were saying, we have confidence in you that you can do it. But yet I wasn't able to sort of help my son calm down, or, cure the fussiness or anything like that was going on. So I'm like, they're like, moms are supposed to know what they're doing. And that was what was rolling around in my head. So I know that feeling. And then I think it's made it worse over time with social media, Instagram especially, because we have filters and we can make our babies look, you know, super cute and adorable in these like matching outfits versus the reality of life. I think I was walking around half the time with barf all over me. From both of my sons had really bad reflux, and literally you know, after they've both been fed, it was just, you were covered in sick and it was disgusting. Like I used to have it in my hair. I'd walk out the house and be like, I still smell it. Like I've had a shower. I've like washed my hair. Like what? Like where is it? You know? And I was always, but I could just smell it on me all the time. And again, as a mom, you're thinking like, oh, you know, I'm going to walk down the street and my baby's going to be cooing and everything. And mine was just barfing and crying. And people were like, oh, like, you know, are you all right? And I'm like, I'm fine. And I was kind of just, again, I was always telling everyone I was fine, but I wasn't. So that's where the mental health piece comes in. So, you know, I would say, what would be sort of the issues that you see for women before going into motherhood that are kind of conditioning them, I guess, to get into that mode of, I'm going to be this amazing mom? Like what do you think women are doing before they get to that having the baby part?
I think there's some, certainly for me, and this is what I've discovered about myself and what I can, and I think there's a lot of other women that have the same experiences, is we can set ourselves up for failure because failure is a too strong a word, but set ourselves up for a fall, I suppose, because we think we need to be perfect. And it's kind of what you were just saying then, wasn't it? Like we kind of say to ourselves, I need to know everything. I am the mum, so therefore I know I should, it's a horrible word, know exactly what to do as soon as my baby comes along. And, you know, and people say to you things like, I remember people saying to me, oh, your instincts will kick in and, you know, you will know instinctively what to do. And you'll know what the different cries mean. Like, I never could tell the difference between the different cries. I've never been able to do that.
No pressure.
And people would say stuff like that to you. But then you can also, you've also got this element of wanting to be the best and putting loads of pressure on yourself to be perfect. And I did that before I even had kids. I did that in my career. I did that in relationships. I did that with friends. You know, I always had to be the best at everything. Otherwise, I didn't feel good enough. And when we take those behaviors into, because you're not just going to all of a sudden stop doing stuff like that because you have kids.
Right.
But it's if you can address those sort of behaviors before you have children, then you start off on a better footing and you're less likely to struggle with your mental health.
I think a lot of people are on autopilot though. A lot of people are not really realizing that they have issues. I think until they have children, and then they start to see, oh, I've done this in other areas as well, right?
Yeah, well, absolutely. That's what happened to me. I had absolutely no self-awareness, and it took having a child for me to start to address some of these underlying behaviours that were not doing me any favours, which were actually creating anxiety, creating perpetual burnout, making me hate myself. But it wasn't until becoming a mum that I started to unpick all of this stuff. But I probably wouldn't, if I hadn't have had kids, I don't know if I would have ever tackled this, because adding a child into the mix adds, you just can't carry on like that.
Yeah.
But when it's just you and you've got your own, you're just responsible for yourself, you can kind of get away with these unhelpful behaviors.
Right.
But once there's a child in the mix, it's impossible to carry on like that. I'd absolutely love to be able to, for every mum to, before they have kids, to do this exercise in self-awareness, because I think it would just be amazing, and it would reduce so many more cases of depression and anxiety. But yeah, like you say, we're not always aware. We're just getting through the day. We're just on autopilot.
Right. A lot of people, I think, go into it with the rose-colored glasses, thinking, "Oh, I'll be fine," and because they haven't experienced that, right? What would you say about sort of generational? I want to say like generational trauma, but generational sort of upbringing throughout different family lives. Like, do you think that's sort of pulled into this mix as well of how you've been raised, or you don't want to be raised that way? Like, how do you sort of see that with people?
I think we have a lot of what I would call subconscious programming that we're given when we're as children, and it's not always that helpful. And I think we create ways to protect ourselves when we're kids, and then we bring it into our adult life, and it just doesn't work anymore. So I'll put it into context. Like for an example, for me, I was a massive people pleaser. I could not say no to anyone. I found it really difficult to say no.
Right.
And it's because when I was growing up, I was taught to be a good girl. I was taught to be a good girl and do as I was told, and always please people, and that was how I got approval, and that was how I got love.
Right.
And so I carried that behavior into, and then my parents, they were doing their best. They weren't being horrible to or anything like that, but they were repeating what their parents had done, and then that people pleasing behavior carries on.
Right. It's generational.
Yeah, exactly. So things like that, and unless you become self-aware and do the inner work, you're just going to keep carrying on that behavior. So I would pass that on to my son. And do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I find a lot of people, when I see people, it's usually because they've come to sort of a standstill of like, they're now at this like they've been going around in circles for a really long time, repeating the same patterns, and they come to this adversity point, and they're like, I am not getting through whatever I'm like having a trouble with, like whether it's a really screaming, crying, colicky baby, relationship stress, or anything like that. People aren't sort of looking at their stuff, and to get through that adversity, you need to really look at yourself and dive in deep. But a lot of people, like I said, we talked about the rose-colored glasses and people being on autopilot. They're like, yeah, no, and they kind of like go the other way, and then they repeat the same cycle over and over again.
Oh, yeah.
And so they kind of don't get through. But it's when you get to that point and you're like, I've had enough. Like there's enough pain in this situation that I don't want to repeat the same thing. That's when people start to look at themselves and look at their past and think, what have I been doing? And you will typically see a repeat of these type of behaviors throughout not just one area of your life. So parenting is a big one. It's like relationships are big when you go from being single to a relationship, because now you've got to consider somebody else. And then you have, children, and that's an even bigger one because they take up so much of your time and your energy. And you have to put the effort in. Like, it's not like, oh, I'll leave that till later, because like they're not going to wait, So it's almost like it makes you have to look at your stuff, basically, becoming a
Oh,
parent.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
I really believe that. Yeah.
I would love if you could give some of the viewers here what it is to be a first-time mom, even a second and third time, some solutions to this, because a lot of moms really struggle around this area. Maybe they're noticing it for the first time, like, yeah, I'm getting to that point where I've had enough and I'm yelling at my kids all the time, or I'm burnt out, or I'm not feeling like myself and I'm feeling really low and I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's me or what's happening, and especially with this going on in the world right now, a lot of people might confuse the depression or anxiety to the pandemic versus what's actually going on at home. So there's probably a bit of muddledness with that as well. So what do you kind of see as sort of some solutions that would help these women?
Well, the first thing that I would say to anyone, and this is usually the crux of the issue for most people, is your relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
That is the first thing to start working on, before you even like tackle any programming or anything like that. Is look at your relationship with yourself. And I think what I come across quite often when I work with mums is we have this belief that our self-esteem is set in stone. You know, if you had some adverse experiences as a child, then you believe that you can't, you know, that's who you are because of your experiences.
Right.
But actually, we can change how we view ourselves, and we can change our opinions of ourselves, and it's like a muscle, your self-esteem, your self-worth, and it's something that you can build upon every day. And you know, I work on my self-esteem every day, and it's just a case of changing some habits, because the way we talk to ourselves, how we view ourselves, are all habits. They're just habits that we've fallen into. So my advice for anyone would be to start listening to how you talk to yourself. It's so powerful, because we can spend like the whole day criticizing ourselves without even realizing, and it's really damaging. And just changing that on a daily basis, recognizing when you're criticizing yourself and trying to reframe how you view stuff. So this, as an example, so you might say, oh, my child's watched 2 hours TV today, that makes me, you know, I'm a bad mum, they've had too much screen time. Instead, you could view that as I've put them in front of I'm tired today, so I've let them watch TV to look after my mental health. If I'm happy, they're happy. You know, just changing that what you think about yourself it can completely change your outlook on life, because the world is inside out. So how you feel on the inside, the outside world is a reflection of that. And if you change your opinion of yourself and work on your self-esteem on a daily basis, everything becomes easier.
I think that
it's just a change of habits.
Yeah, I think with that one goes very much into, I think, once you start looking after yourself, you have boundaries for yourself and around other people. So you notice big changes.
Yeah.
For yourself.
Yeah, but changing those thought patterns, because it's actually really eye-opening, the amount of people that I speak to that don't realize that they can change the way they think. We think our thoughts happen to us, but actually we're in control of our thoughts.
It's because we're subconscious.
You don't have to spend all your time telling yourself off and you know, criticizing yourself and berating yourself. You can choose to talk to yourself in a different way, and that's one of the key things that I would get anyone that's feeling overwhelmed, burnt out, stressed, anxious, depressed, anything, that's one of the first things I get them to address, is that relationship with themselves.
I think most people look on the outside first and see what can I change in my environment. You can't change your kids out or anything like that. But you kind of start looking like, oh, I need to spring clean, and you kind of start getting busy elsewhere, but you're not really looking at where your mind is at, right? Like where your tapes are in your own head, and you're walking around almost with like all these, handbags, purses on you, and they're just full of like negative criticism of yourself.
Yeah. I mean, you could have the biggest house, you could have a state-of-the-art pushchair, you could have, a nanny, and you could have this amazing nursery that's got all the latest stuff in it, and it just wouldn't matter if the inside wasn't, if you on the inside you hated yourself. It's like, none of it matters. But you're right, and I think that's what we're taught actually, and this is, we're not taught how to internalize these things and take it back to ourselves. I think we're consumers, aren't we? We're taught how to consume.
Go shopping.
Spend
money, go shopping, you'll feel better. And then you put the clothes on and you still feel, don't feel good, right? And a lot of moms struggle with that.
There's all sorts of, and there's all sorts of stuff when as soon as you become a mum, there's like sleep coaches, there's, I don't know, like, baby yoga. There's all sorts of new things that you can do with your kids. So we start to think, maybe if I get sort out their sleep, then I'll be fine. Or maybe if we do more, bonding sessions together, then I'll be fine. Or maybe if I can't think of other things, but there's lots of different services, isn't there, that you can you can spend your money on all sorts of stuff.
It's band-aid approaches basically.
So
it's short-term fixes. It's just like what we say in holistic health is, the dieting industry is a band-aid fix. It will do the job, but it won't cure you basically of all the tapes and the stories that you have played in your head for years and years, because you go back to sort of the same issues. So again, that new pram or nursery or whatever you're going to buy or something for yourself, it's just a temporary fix to make you feel good in the moment, but it doesn't change the long term. So I think working on yourself is massive. Do you have any other tips or anything that you can say to mums when they do become a mum?
Self-compassion is, and cutting yourself some slack. That's, just recognizing it's that perfectionism, because that perfectionism creates low self-esteem as well. Because what we do is we say I have to be here. I have to reach this expectation. And then when we don't reach our own standards, we say, right, I need to be at this standard. But then when we don't reach that standard, we beat ourselves up. It's just these are sort of unhelpful things that we do. So it's just recognizing when we're trying to, when we're putting too much pressure on ourselves, we're putting heaps of pressure on ourselves, and just lowering those standards. And another thing that's really good is just starting to recognise all the small wins, because what we do is when we're like that, when we have this tendency towards wanting to be perfect, is we will say, I need to get here. I need to be this person, which is, Mary Poppins, perfect up here. And I'm not going to be good enough until I get there. And because you're so focused on that end goal, you miss out on all the tiny little things you are doing right. And actually, as a mum, you have multiple wins every day, just little tiny things, like I managed I managed to
I
have a
got
shower
dressed.
today.
Yeah, got dressed.
Yeah. Because we don't see that as significant, but
No,
actually it's huge. And
it is huge.
Getting out for a walk and just I remember going out for a walk and then telling myself off because I didn't stay out for an hour, which is what I'd told myself I was going to stay out for. Actually, I was depressed and I got out for a walk. That is massive. So,
Exactly.
just things like that, recognizing those little wins through all the time, because it soon drags you down if you're constantly not, striving for this end goal.
I look back and I think about how many little wins I had. Definitely, like I was working out. Like I brought my first son to the gym with me in like the daycare for like almost 5 days a week, and and I was dressed every day, putting makeup on, hair, everything. And I thought, oh God, like I'm barely getting anything done, Like again, because my standard of, again, if you're very career orientated before you have children, and then also you step into this like mum role, you think, oh, I feel like I'm being lazy, but you're not. And I struggled with that too, because I felt like I always had to be doing more. And if I was sitting, it's like, oh, I should be doing some washing right now, or I should go clean. But I was exhausted. I was tired. I had like 2 hours of sleep. So my brain went into like not take care of myself. It was more like, oh, I should go do those dishes and make some dinner, And it was like, and here's me like barely keeping my eyeballs like open. The other one I was going to mention too, which not a lot of people do, and I probably didn't do this in the first round myself, was asking for help from other people.
Oh yeah.
Like, I struggled with that.
Weakness sometimes, don't we?
Yeah, that's what I did.
Yeah. So actually, I talked about this the other day. Vulnerability is strength, and we get this confused. And I remember talking to someone recently, and she was bereaved, and she said, "Oh, I can't cry in public." I was like, "Yes, you can.
Yeah.
You've had a bereavement. You are allowed." But we see it as a weakness. And just going on a tangent there, but it's the same sort of thing. But yeah, we see it as a weakness, and that's why we struggle to ask for help, because it's that's part of our conditioning as well, isn't it? Part of that conditioning from a child is I don't know if it's the same in Canada, but we have this we have this thing in England where this phrase where you have to have a stiff upper lip. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, I originated from the UK, so it was it was like sort of just cheer up or whatever. But I think we've always had that notion, if you're in a perfectionism mode, I could hear as you were saying that, the words of like, put on your happy face, like when you're in public or when you're out of the people with your baby or whatever. It's kind of that stiff upper lip, like it's appearances, right? I'm doing well, and whenever anybody asks like how, like what do most people ask you when you go out? How are you doing? Oh, I'm fine. That's like just the instant reaction. You're not like, actually, I've had like 2 hours of sleep and I've cried all morning, and all this, and I've got dressed 3 times because the baby barfed on me. Like, it's, people aren't real, and I think it comes from that place of we have to make it look like we're doing okay. And I think that's part of like the whole, we don't want to ask for help. And I know for myself, when I was struggling with that, it was because I had this notion, I guess, that I should know like what I'm doing, and I shouldn't really need a break. I've only got 1 kid and I can't even handle that, and that was kind of the tapes I was hearing. Yet I was doing an amazing job with a very colicky baby and getting a lot done. But I look back at that now and say that in those moments I was probably beating myself down like, oh, I don't need a break because I barely do anything anyways. But that was the tapes, right? So it's,
and it goes back to what you were saying earlier, isn't it? That we don't feel like we deserve something unless it's hard. We don't feel like we deserve to be happy unless it's hard work.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's it. That's something that we believe. And I see a lot of people believe that as well. And another thing that I hear a lot of people is that they almost dismiss their own feelings because they believe that someone somewhere else is worse off than them.
Yeah.
So it's almost like it's saying, well, I can't ask for help. I just have to, keep going on because I'm privileged. I've got money, or I've got had successes in my life. So I don't deserve to be struggling. I shouldn't be struggling because I've got I've got loads of support, and I've got money. So then you have this other factor where you don't want to ask for help because you don't feel like you can.
Right.
Do you know what
and
I mean?
Again, it's that shouldn't part as well, right? And I think it all ties in together with perfectionism at the end of the day. And I think looking at that as sort of a route to starting out being a mom and putting that story together in your head of what it's going to look like. And I think if women, we can sort of, I guess, lower a little bit our expectations and think that we're going to sort of bond right away. Like, that's a great thing if you can. And breastfeeding is a breeze for you, and your baby sleeps right away and all this stuff. But a lot of women secretly do suffer in silence because they think there's something wrong with them when their baby's struggling to sleep or not walking for the, like the rest of the kids. Like, you think, like, what am I doing wrong? Like, am I not teaching them the right way? I find it's especially the first time mom. Like, I noticed with my second, because I went through all that with my first, I was a lot easier on myself. And it was almost like, oh, he'll be fine. He'll catch up. He was a very different baby, very easy. And it was almost like I put him down to sleep and be like, well, now what do I do? Because he's actually going to sleep. Like, I'm usually walking around, like, pacing, like, for hours holding a baby. And I realized at that point, I'm like, a lot of what was going on was in my head. Like, I wasn't sorting out, like, how I felt being a new mom. And it helped me, I think, re-bond to my eldest son when he was a toddler, because I thought it's not me, and I could sort of heal that side of me. So I found it almost going in second time being a mom. For any of those moms out there, because I know that there's moms out there like, I've had this like really bad experience the first time, I don't know if I want to have a second kid. And I was on sort of that same feeling, like, I don't know if I want to do this again. Like, I don't know if I'm cut out to be a mom. But going in second time, it opened my eyes, and I realized, wow, like, I didn't realize how hard I was on myself. It was a pleasure having you on, and I'm excited to talk about this topic near and dear to my heart, because this is a big struggle that a lot of women have gone through. So thank you so much, Naomi, for coming on to the Nutritious and Delicious podcast. Now, our viewers are going to be able to actually book a discovery call with Naomi, and I will leave that in the show notes for you again. So thank you so much, and it's been a real pleasure having you on the Nutritious and Delicious show and sharing your story and your words of wisdom with us here today.